Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Are You Reading? This is a little panel sort of setup where we find a guest, in this case, two, so this is a bonus, where we ask them about what they've been reading and why. And on that note, can you introduce yourself, you two?
Um,
I'm Crispy. We both came in. There's first, Laura. I'm Crispy. I am the older sister of our duo, and we both together write the comic Ghost Junk Sickness.
and I'm Laura. I'm the younger sister, and yeah, we're here for a good time.
Awesome. And I am Kevin Wilson. I am a designer at Hiveworks, but also a fan of every comic that I made a site for. And one of my favorite comics that I made a site for is Ghost Junk Sickness.
Oh damn!
And my pronouns are he, him. What are your pronouns, you two?
Mine are she, her.
Mm-hmm.
And I am she, they.
Awesome. So, you may see it on the screen, but it's time for me to ask the question. So, what are you reading?
So many things.
Just like looking at everything we've put together. It was really actually hard to narrow it down to be like, okay, let's have it thematically, let's have it all make sense, but let's have a good time. As much as this could possibly go on for 10 hours, we've shortened it to our nice little list of slides, and we're going to talk about the importance of indie comics making LGBTQ comics in that scene and how solidified they are, and just the meanings of them, the themes, and again, their importance for our world today and for many readers who need them.
Wonderful. And where would you
Yes,
start?
I second that notion.
I third it.
I would hope.
And I can fourth it too if you need. But where would you like to begin then in this list?
I think it's
So
important to maybe like start in what's going on in like the publishing world, the more like the mainstream publishing world, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
which would bring us to like companies like For Second and Koyama Press and things like that. So I think on top of our list would be The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wong.
Interesting. Uh, what made you choose this first?
I think that mostly it was because, like, I'm sure a lot of people are quite aware of this comic, and it's just it's a beautiful comic, and I love it so much. And I think it's just a great thing to get a lot of people started on with like different queer graphic novels and material like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my own experience reading it, not only do I think it's like a really good story to intro people into queer content if they've never read any, but it
Yeah.
also, like, I immediately thought, like, I have two nieces and they're very young. And I immediately thought, like, what age can I give this to them? Not because the story is too dark or anything of that nature, but they can barely get through, like, a chapter book or a sentence when I'm talking to them. So
Yes.
but it is so wonderful that I immediately thought, like, oh, I know exactly, like 1 or 2 years. They're very, very young. But in 1 or 2 years I could
Mhm.
definitely show this to them. And I was taken aback by the story. It's really gorgeous.
It's so wonderful, and it's so heartwarming, and like it's one of those like stories of acceptance and everything that just like it just gives you like the biggest hug in the end, and it's so very sweet.
and like a lot of the themes that are prominent in Prince of the Dressmaker are very tangible for the age groups that they can really appeal to as well. One of the main themes, or I guess like the biggest takeaways, is the fact that Prince and the Dressmaker is very comforting, and it's all about that acceptance and that little bit of a journey that Lady Crystalia goes to become herself. And it's done in a way where tragedy isn't the biggest focal point, and it's honestly it is wholesome. It is a good story, and it definitely gives you, like Laura said, those feelings and whatnot.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
do want to also like talk about the art aspect of it too, because I find like the art is just like entrancing to look at. Like every line is just like so satisfying to look at. Like every like fold of the fabric, or just like the way that she draws the eyes and everything. It's just everything is just so appealing,
Hmm.
and with also being like so simple too, which I think it's a skill in itself to have like art that is basically just like lines and base colors and still look complete and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I mean, and that makes it really easy to, I mean, the characters are really clear. There's a lot of, like, you can see in the example here, there's a lot of panels where it's against a full color, but the paneling is very interesting. The flow is very easy to understand, but also very creative. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that makes it really easy to follow, um,
Yes.
in a good way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's absolutely clear in its motion and everything that it wants you to feel, it does exactly that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
So now I'd like to jump to yet another comic in our nice little guess published works that we're going to be talking about. And this one is called On a Sunbeam. It's a bit of a genre change in the fact that The Prince and the Dressmaker was more fantasy. I mean, this one is also fantasy, but sci-fi. And this one is another Tilly Walden piece, and another absolutely touching and a hauntingly beautiful piece.
yeah, I,
Yeah, I have strong feelings about Tilly Walden's work. I initially had read Spinning, which was her autobiographical um, excuse me, her autobiocomic about herself growing up queer and also being an ice skater. And so from that to On a Sunbeam, it was quite a dramatic change from the two books. And it's kind of funny because when I read a little bit up of like her talking about On a Sunbeam herself, she's like, I don't write sci-fi. I don't read sci-fi. I just wanted to try this because I just wanted to do it because I didn't see what I wanted to see in current sci-fi. So I was like, okay.
awesome.
it
Same,
was it
big
was
same.
funny to like go into this comic knowing that she had no prior experience to anything in the genre really. And initially, when I was thinking of On a Sunbeam for recommendations and everything, I actually forgot it was science fiction. I thought it was fantasy. But of course, I think the two genres do quite blend all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, like I have not had a chance to read On a Sunbeam yet, but looking from this and from what I know so far, it felt like a very speculative fiction story, like in the
Yeah.
sense that um it doesn't seem like it's a hard sci-fi in the sense that they go over like chemistry lessons or anything, but that
Hmm.
it's exploring a like possible space, but in a like it didn't seem like there was magic per se. Is that right?
Yeah. There is mention of magic, but I don't think it's like literal.
Got you. Got
But
you.
then there is like some like fantastical kind of things that happen like in the later half of the story. Like there is things that are just like it very much switches to that genre of fantasy at one point.
Hmm.
And I do find that interesting.
Got you. And who would you recommend this story to in particular?
It's kind of difficult because Tilly Walden does this wonderful job of like basically describing what it's like to be a child and to like feel estranged in that fact of like growing up as queer or anything like that. And but she doesn't really write for children because like there is a gratuitous amount of swearing and there is violence and everything, and the story does
Mm-hmm.
take quite a dark turn. So I guess depending on how you really like feel about like kids reading swear words or whatever, it's a difficult one to place, to be quite honest.
Crispy,
But I
who would you
do
recommend it
recommend it.
to?
Honestly, I would have felt like a badass probably reading it as 12 to 15. And I feel like that's kind of like the starting age of like jumping into things and kind of discovering yourself. I would safely recommend it to like probably 14 and up kind of thing. I don't want to put like an age limit or anything like that with like swear words or whatever. I don't find that the content at all is too much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely want to touch back with the fact that Walden does a lot of writing stories that never existed before, and she writes them because of said points that they don't exist prior. And
Yeah.
I find that extremely important to just jump right in, do it. You haven't seen it before. Why not take a chance? And a Sunbeam really, really does that well.
Yeah, and to what you were saying before, Laura, like I think it's interesting when you get into recommendations because ages I think are a good guideline, but uh there were definitely when I was the same age that you just mentioned, Crispy, um the concept of what was acceptable for my age was all over the place.
Mhm.
And uh the things that scared me were more like psychological horror.
Like
Um,
Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. And just knowing what kind
Yes.
of general thing that people are into or not. It feels like this is not a disturbing story. Is that true?
No, it's not disturbing. It just goes to like a little bit of like darker themes and stuff like that. But
Got
there's
you.
never a point where I thought I was like, "Whoa, this is too dark,"
Got you.
or
Got you.
I would not let children read this at all. Like it wouldn't be. It's not like that at all.
Well, speaking of too dark, do you want to tell me what's next on our list?
Oh, I do. So the next that's on our list, which I was so excited to read, actually, is Emily Carroll's "When I Arrived at the Castle." So this story, it's not very long at all, but holy crap! Like my mind just exploded reading it. I thought it was so friggin' cool.
Oh my gosh. Like, I've been a fan of Emily Carroll's work since I saw their and their pronouns is they, right? They them?
Uh,
I'm just gonna say they for now because I'm
sure.
pretty sure. My mistake if anyone else knows. I'll keep an eye on chat. But Emily Carroll has been so impactful, like to me, not in terms of just design. I think that the way that they lay out their comics online has always been fascinating. But their paneling, like the way that they set up compositions, is so
Man,
it leaves an impression on me really deeply.
oh,
Um,
it's so beautiful.
so like in this story, I haven't gotten to this story yet, even though I really want to. Emily Carroll, because of the history I have with their work, immediately I just go like, yep, I'm gonna read that sometime.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
but
so worth it.
with this story, um, I assume that there's romance elements just from the cover, the images I've seen, things like that. But I don't know what it's about.
Well, if I can give a brief summation of what it's about, it's basically about this girl who looks like a cat, who is determined to kill this countess, who seems to be responsible for this ever-growing body count and everything. And so, like, the story progresses with like her going through this castle and like meeting the countess, and she's just like slowly picking away at like what the countess really is and like the true horror behind her and everything. And like it's horrifying and it's like sexy and it's wild. Like Carol's just like her whole use of space and like silence and then like just everything is so effective in this short story.
I definitely want to point out the fact that the nice dips that we've done with recommending these 3 comics is the fact that with LGBTQ comics, I think there's always this notion that we have to be wholesome all the time.
Yeah.
We have to be these cute hand-holding autobios all the time, which, no shade, I love those. Those always hit you differently with each read. But it's refreshing to see these dark spins, this dark content to really delve into and kind of get excited about with the newest book. So it's good to see books like When I Arrived at the Castle to kind of explore that and kind of be a game changer and really like set queer comics like apart from just being the genre of wholesome that sometimes people label it as.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And like for me, like I was so excited about this because it's just like I love to read something that was horror that wasn't necessarily like a tragedy about being queer or anything like that. It was just a horror involving queer people, and like I just love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is something that I feel Emily Carroll's always had a handle on when it came to their characterization and how they wrote. Is it felt, from the outside, it felt like they are really good at getting a very solid handle on the emotional interior of characters and setting it in a realistic space where, I can assume that the worlds that they exist in do have darker parts to it that are not just vampires. Like there is, oppression in different ways. But the stories rarely ever touch on that in my memory, and I didn't know if this did, or like what is the horror angle that this story has.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fantastic. I'm really excited to take who would you recommend it to?
I would recommend to anybody who is just like nuts about the horror genre and just really wants to see like some saucy ladies being horrible to each other.
Yeah.
And like, queer identities existing because they do, and not because it's sad that they do. It's just they're existing in their own story. It's horrible. Not horrible. It's horrifying, and it's sexy, and it's refreshing. Honestly, it's refreshing when I see Tilly Walden's name. When I see like Emily Carroll's name, I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be a good time. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for recommending it. What's next on the list? Should we keep going?
Oh yeah,
I think that it brings us into the territory of webcomics now, since we were talking about so much about genres and how we feel kind of limited in what like brand publishing allows us to do. Definitely webcomics have allowed us to go just completely wild with whatever we wanted to write.
Yeah.
So on the top of that list, I would say is my very favorite, like all-time favorite webcomic, which would be Shade Runners by Alex Hassan and Lynn Darrow. Anybody who follows me on social media probably has an inkling of how much I obsess over this comic. I truly love this comic so very much.
Yeah.
Every time we talk about like different delving into different genres or even character deconstruction, it's always like, oh yeah, like in Shade Runners, like how they did that.
That's wonderful.
So just to give a little like intro of what Runners is, just in case people
Yeah,
aren't
please.
familiar with it. So, Runners is a story of a group of ragtag bootleggers who steal color from the rich in hopes to open a nightclub and make it available to everyone, no matter their class. So it's kind of like a like Robin Hood heist sort of thing, where like they literally steal like physical manifestation of color and try to make it like just like it's not just limited to the rich and everything as it has been for like thousands of years.
I just want to point out the fact that Shade Runners is done entirely in black and white, and they use heists, this talk of color. Actually, the first time it comes into the comic is very hauntingly and amazingly well done. But when you realize that color has been taken from the world, it just makes it that much more deep and that much more amazing.
Yeah.
The two do an amazing job with character constructions and character interactions. And again, because of our panel being very LGBTQ positive, the characters that exist in the world are just existing in a world that queer people exist. There's not a lot of anti this about their identities. It's very natural. It's very positive with who they are. So it's a really good spin to see a historical comic have that kind of in it as a treat.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, because it's very much like inspired by the 1920s time period and everything, whereas they took a lot of nuances and like a little bit of like the historical aspects of it and everything, and plunked it into this fantasy universe.
yeah, while I was working on the site and I've read it, I've gone back to read it a lot of times. I was struck by not only I mean, what both of you are saying. One, the use of color as a thematic element where it's really impactful. And to the point that I was watching someone play through Mario Color Splash for the Wii U, and the whole time, because the whole premise is color based, and I was just like, oh man, Shade Runners. And it just kept coming up in my head.
Shade Runners on the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Mario Shade Runners. But like using color as a metaphor, but not as the way that Shade Runners tackles that as it's very nuanced and subtle in a lot of ways, where it's not there's other fiction that I've read where they use a concept like that as a very broad way to talk about a problem.
Yeah.
But because of the way they've constructed the world and the way in which they execute on introducing the concept of color and what the removal of that does, like what prohibition of this thing does, it's very intelligent in the way that they hold it, like the way that they use it. Absolutely.
Yes, and like I love Shade Runner's world building and everything for it, because honestly, it has to be one of the most like thorough world building that I've ever seen in a comic, right down to the slang that they use. Like all of that was like both of their invention, and like it's just I love it. I love how much they thought of this world and what would work in this universe, and like like they even have like their own specific card games and just like everything that they've already thought of that's integral to the world, and it's just it's marvelous. It really is.
Yeah.
Poetically done, like all the time. Like you could fall in love with like a simple sentence that a character says, and you're like, "This is candy. This is gold." It's hard to put it down.
It is. It really is. It's really
Oh
addicting.
my god! And I just recently reread it because I wanted to brush up on my Shade Runner's knowledge, and I just had to like lay there for a moment, just being like, "Holy shit! Like this shit is amazing."
Absolutely. And to dig in a little bit more into the plot, is there is there anything with like a particular character or a particular part of the story that really makes you want to recommend it to people?
I would recommend it to anybody who really likes to see a lot of like conflicted and a lot of dynamic characters that are like all in one group that have to like geez sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Oh, no, it's fine. Like one so like characters who are going through an internal like emotional struggle.
Yeah, and like they're so dynamic and they're so complicated and complex and everything, and like in equal parts they have great qualities and also like really shitty qualities. And if you want to see like wonderfully complex characters in a wonderfully constructed world, I would definitely recommend it to anybody, regardless of their interest into like the genre or like the time period or anything like that.
Yeah, it's honestly, I would use it for reference. I would use it for sole enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
It's top tier. I mean, we're all obsessed with it. We've said that countless times in this stream. But no, I love the deconstruction of characters. I love the introduction of characters. Everything's so meticulously planned out, but it's not a lot to read, if that makes sense. It's not, oh my goodness, there's so much to learn. It's just, it comes natural. You sink right in, and it's a good webcomic. It is top tier good webcomic.
Yeah, and like for my own 2 cents, I think I recommend Shade Runners to people who really like an exploration of a metaphor. People who tend to like magical realism, I think, tend to like it in my mind. Because or fabulism, I think is the way it is like another term for it, where it tries to ground things as much as possible in a way that you can relate to. This world operates with physics and all that sort of thing. But the element that's added that is fantastical is like heightens a lot. And the characters are emotionally conflicted. And I'm going to use the word melodramatic, but that's not judgment, hopefully.
No.
There are stories that are very much like absolutely 100% focused on someone going through an emotional experience. And because this cast is pretty big, so it's an ensemble sort of story in my mind. And I think that makes them, it keeps it from being like a solo exploration of someone's deep emotion. Everyone does have those emotions, but there is a plot. There are things moving.
Yes.
And it doesn't. So if someone is more into like very intense drama that I would call melodrama, maybe, it might not get exactly there, but there's so much emotional realism in the characters. There's so much like it doesn't overstay its welcome when it comes to its writing and how it goes through moments. So I tend to give it towards like that sort of audience. And then when it comes to like age range or like, I think anything YA plus basically in my mind, because there wasn't any part, there's some parts that would spook particular people, I think. But there wasn't any part that really felt like it was completely inappropriate for someone like 16 or older or something, depending on their personality.
No.
What do you two think?
I definitely have to agree. I feel like the text complexity can sometimes be hard to hop over with like how poetic it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But I feel like when I was probably about 14, I tried to power through stuff regardless of me fully getting it. And I feel like even if I was someone who just wanted that rep so bad, I would be like, yep, I'm in love with every character. I want to see what happens with them and whatnot. So I think the younger, or probably like middle teen up kind of thing, just to get all of the
Yep.
context,
Yeah.
is probably who I'd recommend it to. And again, I'm gonna have to chime it or echo what Laura said about. I don't think it needs to be someone who's just into the era for me to recommend to them. I feel
Mhm.
like it's broader than that. I feel like, hey, do you like fun characters? Do you want to see a cool deconstruction and super awesome world building? Here you go. Shade Runners, please read.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yes.
like I, I'm super guilty of that of like when I was a teen, I read through Dante's Inferno, but without any help, and that means in retrospect, I looked at the words of Dante's Inferno. I did not understand it. Um,
Exactly it. Oh my god.
and that's definitely not here. There is a poetic style, and I agree with you. I agree with you, Crispy, that like I think it is something that particular people, if you skew too young, they might have a hard time sort of figuring it out because some characters do talk a little bit differently. Um,
Yeah.
Yes.
but like I think past the point, past that point that you said, I think absolutely it would just be like, oh, this is the style that I'm in.
Yeah, and I think looking back when I was reading, just to kind of sidetrack a little bit, looking back when I was reading text or books or whatever younger, I feel like I did not get stuff like Dante's Inferno when I was reading it at the time.
Mhm.
But you as you go older and you realize that you did enjoy that attempt, that journey that you did make
Yeah,
through it. I feel like you go back and appreciate it more. You still
yeah,
have that fondness for like, yeah, guys, I did read Dante's Inferno. It was great. And
yeah. Hard mode reading. Um, I like it.
not that Shade Runners is hard mode reading, but there's definitely some nuance, some text that you kind of get stuck on being younger. But you know what? If there's someone who's younger in the stream that wants to challenge that, I mean, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not gonna stop that, but
Absolutely, absolutely. And Laura, did you say who you would recommend this to?
Um. Yes, I believe I did, and it was
Perfect.
more so just parroting what everybody else said.
Oh no, no. I mean that's perfect. That helps me know that I'm right on, and
Oh, you are absolutely.
that's perfect. That's perfect. And like, I think this is gonna be a weird pull. I think, but I think people who respond to characters who are giving emotion, like portraying emotions that feel real, that you can relate to, where like if I'm watching an action movie, I do not need to feel emotionally connected
yes.
Yeah.
to someone's decision
No.
to like drop kick a gun and shoot someone with it.
Yeah.
Um, but in Shade Runners, like all of their decisions are grounded in a very real emotional world that they have that I've seen in other people or I could see in myself.
Yes.
And I think that so I if someone likes like Steven Universe, which is lighter in tone than here, but it does explore emotions in a way.
Mhm.
And I think that
Yeah.
like if someone's like, oh, I really like Steven Universe, but I want to read something else and I want to read something maybe a little bit older in tone or whatever they're thinking. Um,
Absolutely.
I've thrown Shade Runners at them as a like a curveball kind of recommendation, and it has worked out when that's happened. Um, and then speaking of like characters with really true emotions, do you want to move on to the next one?
I do. The next one is a very dear comic of mine. I talk about it so much
Mm-hmm.
every time I talk about growth and style realization and just honestly endearing characters that not only grew with the author but with the audience too.
Mm-hmm.
And that is A Star Trip by Giselle. And oh my gosh, there's so much to say about this.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, my biggest thing that I always talk about this comic is like I was saying before with the growth that it has clicking on the first page, going to the most recent is honestly the hugest inspiration to me as an artist and creator. And as the story goes along, you realize how crafted, like with love it is, and just how important and impactful it is. And it's colorful. It's got world building like to the nines. After every chapter, they explore the planets that the main character Jas goes through. And just to give like a little bit of a breakdown about what it is, the main character Jas has a bit of a bad time at home, wants to kind of run away from their life on planet Earth. They end up finding this alien Kut that leads them through different galaxies and finds different friends along the way, found family, and basically it's a huge story that really explores the themes of belonging and finding oneself.
Yeah. I I I love the heck out of Star Trip. It is definitely really dear to me. I really really like it. Can It's interesting because when I talk about it with other people, it's one of those stories where I want to. I think I have a hard time describing. I mean, your summary is so good. Mine tend up being kind of sprawling because there's so much that I like about it. Laura, is there like what about this story grabs you as it's presented and as it rolls out?
To be quite honest, I actually haven't got too far in Star Trek,
That's
so
totally
I don't know
fine.
how much I could really provide much insight into that. But it's always one of those comics that I know that I have to get back to, because I know that like just the sheer growth of the comic is always something that I'm like so impressed by.
Yeah.
So eventually, I will get back to it.
No, I mean, even I think that that's a good point though, that like when I recommend comics to people, uh I I try to get across that like this is not a demand for you to read all of it, or like for you to absorb every ounce of it.
Yes.
But Star Trip to me, I feel like even a casual dip into it can be really impactful because Giselle has grown so much as an artist over time. And I'm reluctant to say get better, but definitely they are finding what they're looking for and conveying it. And really narrowing in on what they're trying to do. And they do such they do so much with very, like in this example I have right up here, in the background is a ship that's being powered. And blown up, you can see how broad everything is. Like the shapes are really wide. But there's this watercolor kind of approach that they have that I think really conveys a sense of the world, or conveys like an emotion that I think is just great on its own to send. Like if someone's looking for how do I watercolor my comic, or how do I make my world feel a certain way, I've sent them to Star Trip before. But yeah, like I mean, absolutely. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Laura.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well,
Well, I want to actually talk more about what you just said, Kevin. That just made me realize and got me even more excited about Star Trek. Who knew? But Giselle really works those color cues like no one's business.
yeah,
The beginning is so like on Earth is so drab, it's so dark, it's so like sunken in. And as Jas, the main character, starts to go through the world and see how purples and different colors and excitement brings, it's just insane. It's so good. It's so impactful.
Yeah.
There's actually this one part in the comic. I can't remember exactly what chapter. I feel like it's chapter 6,
Mm-hmm.
where Jess has a bit of a dip in their mood and their life, and having a struggle of like, where am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to trust? And the color cues that happen on this rainy planet, it honestly hits me every time I go through that. It's beautifully done. And
Absolutely.
it's such a good recommendation for even people who are starting out with comics, who want
Yes.
to know how to do full color comics. I'm just like, Star Trek, please. Please look at Star Trek.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like this middle panel that I've put up. This and thank you for giving me this image. Cuz this is perfect for what we're saying. The varieties of purples. They have a bit of pinks in the sky and pink here, a little bit of purpley pinks here and there. But their choice of colors here does such a good job of like, I can clearly see what's happening. And I think people who struggle with monochromatic work, I would even give this to someone who's doing just pure black and white.
Yes. Yes.
To get across that.
Absolutely.
And for me, like, I'm going to go back. The character design is something that I think is something I really like. Here we go. I really like this first one that we're looking at. In the background, you can see some of the layering, the way that they set things up. But like, because they're drawing characters that, like I said before, are broad, meaning that they have like a lot of space in their, the hands are wide. But Giselle has such a good way of like the framing along the edges here, the gradient in the background, like their color sense is so great along with their design. I'm never reading through the comic. I'm never at a loss for what's going on, or where people are.
Yep.
And it's really, I think it ends up heightening the kind of story. It heightens like their use of color. It heightens the story, sort of in a way somewhat similar to Shadowrunners, even though it's not explicit in the story. Like it's not an element or a metaphor they're working with, but seeing this, like I completely connect with the emotion that's being shown here.
Oh yeah.
And like this sort of scene in this next one, like I have a sense of what's happening, and that joy on the face is like I could go on forever.
Easily same.
Crispy, who would you recommend this comic to?
We were talking about previously in the other Rex that with Shadowrunners with the complexity of characters and talking about Steven Universe and stuff like that. And I feel like this is still an older story. It still deals with older themes.
Yeah.
So again, like young teen, older, who want to experience something fun, but something real at the same time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of silliness that happens, but there's so much like real good, I guess, talking, emotion, time to, me kind of thing where they just get real about who they are, what they feel, and what they're supposed to be doing. And honestly, I reading it now, it still hits you pretty hard with how Jess is going through their journey and just where is your place in the world. So yeah, definitely like anybody who wants that colorful approach with like still some serious tones. So again, like people who like Steven Universe or even I guess something like She-Ra, you would like Star Trek.
Those are both really good recommendations. People who tend to, if they like a lot of, like if they tell me their favorite stuff is Dragon Prince or like a lot of animated shows, I will tend to bring up Star Trek because those shows, and because they're working with animation, they can have broad characters. Foster's Home, For Imaginary's Friend, that's an older poll, but like those sorts of concepts. But if they keep telling me like, I really wish they would go to like more alien worlds, or I wish that they would explore emotions a little bit deeper, I end up pushing Star Trek more there. If they mean deeper, as in uh, move through it rather than deeper, as in get really dark.
Yes.
Because I don't think Star Trek is afraid of getting dark at all. I don't think Giselle's worried about that at
Yeah.
all. But I think that Giselle doesn't linger on darkness very, very long, and depending on what's happening, but like knows when to stop that, because that's kind of not the point of the story of like
Yes.
watching someone spiral.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
I think it's like really based on those feelings in the moment.
yeah.
Everything is in the moment and really, really raw when
Yeah.
when it happens. So, there's things that still linger with like feelings from a conversation that a character would have had. Like Kut is having like basically an identity crisis with Jas no longer being dependent on them.
Yeah.
So to see them kind of like date with Jas's new friends, and still trying to learn that it's okay that, we're a family now, and, we will get along and we do love you kind of thing. I love how Giselle does it. I love you,
Absolutely.
Giselle.
Absolutely. I hope Giselle sees this and just explodes. Because
Giselle.
yeah, you're doing amazing work, Giselle. And then should we move on to the next one?
Yes, as much as I can keep going on and on.
Yeah, we could do a whole other hour on Star Trek by itself.
So our next one would be Tiger Tiger by Petra Nordland, which is I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Petra and her work.
Yeah.
But it is definitely worth mentioning because it is fantastic.
Yeah, I loved like working on this site. I was constantly, as I was like adjusting things and making sure that the site wasn't conflicting with the artwork. It was very early days when Petra was working on it, so I got to see some of like the early pages, and everyone else like, woof, wow, these are great. They're so complex, not complex as in overwhelming or too much detail. There's so much going on that I want to look at, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh yes. The way that Petra tackles her world building blows my mind all the time. Intro with like leading up to these people gossiping about the main character and leading up to what this main character is up to, and then going kind of back and forth, but just doing it so seamlessly. And you're slowly learning about this universe that Petra has constructed, with even just the background details, with some of the words that's being said, with even who they worship as a religious stance with their gods and stuff like that. It's intense and it's so riveting, and I could not stop. As soon as I started reading it, it's definitely one of those books where you're just like, next page, next page, next page.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'll give a little rundown of what Tiger Tiger is about as well,
Please.
just for people who don't know. So it's a story about a young noble lady who steals her brother's identity and his ship to sail the seas, finding love and adventure. So it's a very just catchy, snappy little tagline that it's just like, okay, I have to see what this is about.
Yeah.
And sea sponges.
And sea sponges, yes, of course.
Well, I mean, while I was struck with Crispy, you talked about world building, and I was struck with how Petra's very skilled at knowing how much to give you at a time.
Yes.
Where I never felt like there are stories out there where it feels like the whole plot stops so a character can turn to you and be like, okay, this next part, I'm going to need to get this across to you or it's not going to make any sense. And some creators are better at that than others. And Petra, to me, is one thing I really like about Tiger Tiger is you will be confused, but not to the point that you put the book down. You'll be like, okay, now I want to know what that's about.
It's not to a detriment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like, I just shifted it to another page with, this is not a real page, but while we were making the slides, all three of us, this worked out perfect. Um, these are two independent panels. Uh, but like, I think one thing, like, to talk about something we had recommended before, Emily Carroll is not humorless in their work, but
No.
I think Petra is, and not to directly compare, but I think one thing that I really like about Carroll's work is how um, they're able to create creatures, they're able to create world moments that are incredibly impactful and very gorgeous, but also incredibly mysterious. And you kind of don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And Carol puts that to good work where you want to run away.
Yeah.
And in Petra's, I'm always struck by how it intrigues me, and it provides a mystery where in the very beginning part, I mean, like the first time you see Luck,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
the like that's a whole bunch of questions, and you will get some of those answers over time, but also some of those over time you realize are not exactly super important.
Yes.
Uh, and here are two of the characters. And can you explain a little bit about what goes on in Tiger Tiger to me?
So much. So
Just for people who just start to like give them a concept of what the beginning is, because it moves around a lot. Like there are parts
feel
here
like
and there.
so much like a movie in some
Yes,
aspects with how
it's
it deals
very, yep.
with around, but it's not jarring. It's not like, okay, okay, like where are we now? It's just so natural the way that Petra does it. So the beginning is all about Ludo stealing her brother's ship to sail the seas to get them sea sponges. And in the panels and examples we have here is actually a flashback. Petra does flashbacks a lot in the book. We actually start
Mm-hmm.
with a flashback,
Mm-hmm.
and this scene specifically is Remy with Yamas, and they're dealing with one of the storms that they had to go through, basically with huge consequences thanks to Yamas, and basically him discovering his loyalty to Remy as a friend and a person and as a captain. So a lot of like really good, basically like character building moments. Petra is such a master at that. And I definitely want to point out the fact that the way that Petra introduces characters is probably one of my absolute favorites of
Yeah.
all time. Unfortunately, I didn't grab the picture of when Ludo was first introduced, but she is seen sitting in a chaise lounge getting painted with all these birds in her hair, and it's just this full spread panel of gorgeousness.
Yeah.
The most like extravagant like setup for a character to be introduced, and I love that intro so much.
Yeah.
You see such a poetically put together piece that you don't forget it. And Yamas is another character, another main character, gets introduced by barreling out of a carriage drunk, and it's just the way that Petra sets these up is just, you don't forget it.
Yeah.
Nothing here is
No.
forgettable about Tiger Tiger. I can definitely remember all of the key points of it very firmly.
Yeah. And for people who are, oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, I didn't want to like sidetrack it, but
No.
I did just want to talk a little bit about basically how in Petra's work you feel so much joy like behind the work, and
Yes.
like you really see like how much she loves to make this comic or anything that she works on, and in turn it's just like it's infectious. So
Yeah.
like when she's getting like ramped up for like the next scene that's coming and everything like that, it's just like I'm just like bouncing in my seat and I'm just like, yeah, this is great. Like
Yeah.
at every moment. It doesn't even matter like how mundane the scene is. Like I'm just excited to see it.
Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
just wonderfully executed.
I agree. I agree. Like the to your point when Ludo is introduced, I feel like talking about it in terms of cinema makes sense because a lot of times a movie will introduce a character not with their information or what you need to know about them, but like their general tone, like what sort of um, what sort of theme music they kind of have. Um, and I very clearly during reading through Tiger Tiger, I feel like all of them have different theme tunes. Um,
Yes.
and because they're so clearly, they're not like from different comics or anything, but they're very clearly have, a tone to them.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
they're all very distinct and you can like hear their different voices and everything.
Absolutely. And for new readers, you may have been confused when we were talking about Ludo, who is the person who takes the ship. And then, is it Remy is her brother's name?
Yes.
Remy, they're twins.
Yes. Oh,
And
that's the biggest point.
and to me, I think, isn't it that you can tell their difference based on where the mole is?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but I didn't notice that until very late. Like one of my friends pointed out to me because I could tell based on the tone and how how they act and like how the scenes themselves feel different when they're in it. And so I absolutely didn't even notice for a long time, but I didn't need to.
I feel like jumping on that, Petra is a master. Petra is just a master all around, apparently, with writing character dialogue with a voice.
Yes.
You could totally hear when Yamas is talking and Yamas is not on screen. And Petra actually does that a lot, where a character is talking and they're not necessarily on the screen. And I know who's talking from the dialogue, from the just the tone of the text. And that is a skill
Yes.
web comic and comic creators in general. And honestly, it's, if anything, like Tiger Tiger is a great piece to have fun with, to have a great story, but it's also something to study if you
Yes.
want to see how to basically properly convey some characters, because that's some top tier stuff right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like myself, my recommendation list, like who I would recommend Tiger Tiger to. I've recommended it a lot to people who want to, who are interested in worlds like, that might not have a lore Bible. Like they might not have like a wiki page, but they feel very grounded. They feel like they make sense. And it feels like the world in Tiger Tiger expands beyond the characters. But
Yes.
who are definitely character focused. Like they want good characterization. They want, like you said, Crispy, the dialogue is really really good. Like, that the characters are distinct just from a word bubble, who that word bubble is going to. And I also recommend it to people who are fans of black and white work, because I think that the black and white work in this is magnificent. I have no clue how Petra does it. But it is like, while we were making these slides, this background scene, it's so clear. Like even when it's semi-transparent right here, but you can tell exactly what's going on. Doesn't mean you know what's going on. But I think that Petra has this way of adding so much texture and depth to all of the Tiger Tiger pages. It's, if someone, this is going to sound so weird, but I have recommended Tiger Tiger to Junji Ito fans.
Oh,
Not,
I can see it because the creatures, right?
yeah, the creature design is really good.
It's wonderful.
And the level of detail, I think, is what sometimes I go on when I'm recommending it to people, of like,
Yeah.
oh, you like really detailed work.
Yes.
You might like this. And then people who tend to like historical works but aren't super aren't super nitpicky or like particular about is it historically accurate. Um,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
because like I'm a big fan of there's a game called Return of the Obra Dinn, and in it you are playing someone who's trying to solve a mystery, and like pretty quickly, and it's on a pirate ship or something. It's on a boat, and pretty quickly things get supernatural. And I like that, but I could definitely see some people being like, "Oh, this is not what I thought," and then kind of
Yeah.
not excited. That happens really quickly in Tiger Tiger. So if you bounce off that way, like, oh, it's
Yeah.
look at a couple pages and you're done.
These are the people who are just looking for like a historical drama.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If someone's like, I just finished reading Pride and Prejudice, what should I read? I would be like, maybe, but like,
Dante, no.
absolutely, absolutely. But like, I also, you know, a story, when I can tell that someone likes a story that can dip into darkness, but also have levity,
Yes.
without it feeling like whiplash,
Yes.
I'll usually recommend that.
Yeah. He does a really good job of like balancing like that thin line between going like too dark or keeping a like upbeat or anything like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what about you two? Who would you recommend Tiger Tiger to?
I would say that I'd recommend it to anybody who like just like loves like that unique folklore or world building, those aspects, and just like anybody who just wants to read something with really lovable characters. That's the one, because these characters are so incredibly endearing. Like it's only been going on for what, like 200 pages, and to be completely like just enthralled with every character and want to see what happens to them, that's a skill on its own.
Yeah, I definitely parrot everything that Space says with, or sorry, Laura, about this work. It's honestly like I like to recommend a lot of work with people who are just getting into comics, web comics, that whole scene, and it's good for that deconstruction of what you should look out for and what's effective and anything like that. But honestly, Tiger Tiger, that's free game. I recommend it to anybody who just wants something to read because it's just that good.
Yeah,
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 it's kind of like a catch-all for like anybody's interest, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. I feel that way too. And then is there like age, content warnings, anything like that?
I do think that it is like a little bit for at least like older teens and up, because like I do think that Petra said that like it would be dealing with more like sexuality and all that. So probably just a little older, just to be safe.
Yeah, I would. I would say blanket above 17 is my recommendations usually.
Yeah.
And then obviously depending on who they are, but
Yeah.
you know, below that I would want to let their parents know in some way, I guess, like of like not because it's so salacious, but like if you get spooked, like you will get spooked. But it just generally also I kind of feel like even if you're a person who really likes spooky stuff and you're 13, because it's so adult in the sense that everyone's feeling like very mature things in this. You might get bored, like if all you're in for is the goofs, you might be like put off by the fact that it's not goofy the whole time.
Yes.
And that's not bad. It's just, you know, it's a variety. It's absolutely. So if you're in for that variety, so I could see some like 13-year-olds who can handle the dark stuff, maybe not caring for it or wishing it was more of one thing or the other, or just not being able to relate maybe. But generally I end up recommending it to people over 17. And then for content warnings, it is a violent world. Not unnecessarily so. It's not like Petra's not like, hey, check out this gore. But Tiger Tiger is I would say visceral is a word that I sometimes use.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that it's handled very maturely. I think Petra does a very good job. Not dragging things out when it comes to that, but um, like
It's never like just for shock and awe.
absolutely, absolutely. But like for an example, a character's introduction starts with them about to be hanged. Um, Now it does not go the way you think it will, especially over the course of the story. But
Yes.
It's it is it is a violent world.
Yep.
And so sometimes that goes into my thinking when I'm recommending it.
Yes.
But
Oh yeah.
that's all I can think.
Well, I think that the 17 and up is probably the best blanket statement. I think it handles it very maturely when it does dip into darker or more mature themes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very well crafted. And I love you, Tiger Tiger.
I love you, Tiger Tiger. Mwah. Like, and everyone in the chat does too. Like, I just took a look, and we're all in agreement. It's focused like a laser. I hope Petra sees this and just like.
Actually, Tiger Tiger's thematics with how it handles mature subject matter and
Yes.
darkness does remind me of our next recommendation.
Oh yeah.
In the ways that this comic also handles the darker themes, but it's not dark more in a way it's like, hey, it's gore, like you said, Kevin. And the
Mm-hmm.
next one on our recommendation, if I may so jump into that, is
Mm-hmm.
Heirs of the Veil by Phineas and Jasper Klyer.
Yeah. Now I'm very ignorant of this. I haven't had a chance to look at it beyond the pages that we've seen and some very general, like summary sort of things. But so I will definitely need you to fill me in on this. Can you tell me about Heirs of the Veils?
There's so much, Kevin. There's always so much.
I got time.
So
I may.
yeah, go for it.
So, Heirs of the Veil is an urban fantasy story about a young witch on the search for her mother, who and she, geez, wow. All right. So this young witch who's on search for her mother meets a guardian of the supernatural, also known as a Strayer, as they unfold various mysteries behind themselves and their town, Port Arbors.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I really bungled that one.
Oh no.
Excitement talking.
Mm-hmm. And we've been going for a while. Thank you so much. But so what drew you to Heirs of the Veils?
Well, stunning visuals and the backgrounds. Honestly, a level of background work that I don't see as much in webcomics, especially. Do want to point out I have a printed version of this book.
Ooh.
And at the very, very back of the book, the artists or the creators include some concept art of different scenes and different posters and whatnot that the characters interact with. And that level of depth is intense. I always look for that kind of stuff in pieces and in comics and stuff like that to see how much the creator goes into developing a world, because it is like an urban, it's a fantasy world. And to see them go through that extent really shows how much these creators are in love with their work. Again, with like how Petra dealt with how she unfolds her world, I see a lot of it very similarly in Heirs of the Veil.
Got you. So like, is it is it a straightforward plot? Does it move around a lot?
I would say that it is it is fairly straightforward with the events, but it's not like simplistic or anything. It goes in a direct way where it's just like it's easy to follow and you understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it for its clarity in that, where you don't really miss any of the beats, because like they make it in a way so that you just get everything, and you're catching the subtleties and everything, and what the characters are going through, I think is like really effectively done.
Mhm.
Got you. What are the characters going through without spoiling it per se to a new reader like me?
So the main character, the Strayer, his name is Court, and he goes through some pretty intense feelings of dysphoria when the character Vicky kind of says some little insensitive things, being a little naive.
Mm.
And the way that the creators deal with it is artistic, it's metaphoric, it's intense, and it's easy to feel for that character for what they're going through. And honestly, it's something I haven't seen done before with how they deal with those feelings of dysphoria and themselves being a trans person.
Got
And
you.
it's so beautiful how they explore that, how they explore basically that feeling and how raw that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and that's a good point to touch on, that all of these works are inspired by the theme of these streams that we're doing today and tomorrow. And I can see how that's explored in many ways throughout all the comics we're talking about. Here, like, it's, I think front loaded might make it sound like it's hidden in other recommendations we've given, which is not the case at all.
Mhm.
But here, like, it sounds like it is very much, does the term identity story sound right? Not in terms of like, I don't want to reduce what's happening in the story.
No, no, it's pivotal. These identities, these feelings of these characters are raw. They're there, and they are part of the story because of how they deal with it. Now, in the world of Heirs of the Veil, it's not as progressive as what Shaderunners was, with how
Yeah.
they were here and they just lived there and everything was great. So there is some bigotry that the characters face in Heirs of the Veil, and I think it's important to see that, this is still what these people deal with. This is still a very intense and well, horrible feeling that they deal with. But the way that the creators show it and explore it is artistically done. It's and you feel for it.
Yeah, and like, I think cuz it sounds like this is an urban fantasy sort of story in the sense that, there's
Yeah.
fantastical elements, there's magic possibly, is that right?
But yes.
And
Yeah,
so I think that
absolutely.
that gives a different angle where, like, Tiger, Star Trip, Shade definitely, where you're talking about worlds where queerness and your identity is, the world is not built the same way it is here, like in our reality. So it can be hard, I think, in my own writing, but also I see this in other fiction, to one it as much, if that makes sense. Of when you talk about identity and make a story that is very firmly rooted in identity, I'm not gonna say that this can't be done, and I've seen it done. But I think fictional worlds like urban fantasies, it is right now, like, it is our modern world, and I think that helps give it a lot of grounding. And it sounds like the story has a lot of grounding in, like, realness, if that makes sense.
It does, and at the same time, like it's also like sitting on this like mountain of world building as well, because it still is like a fantasy, and it still is like its own unique world.
Mm-hmm.
There just is like some like real life kind of like poles or whatever, but
Yeah.
like it's still like chock full of like this whole fantasy setting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like, in the examples I've seen, the short little bit dip that I took, it felt like it does a really good job. I mean, even these pages that I'm showing right here, one, I really like the creative paneling on the left, and two, I mean, both of them, and two, the clothing that all the characters wear, the way that they're expressing themselves and their identity. It feels incredibly relatable in terms
Yeah.
of people I've seen, people I've met, people I'm friends with, and I love. It, but when it comes to this fantastical angle, this is my bias because I think everything's greater with magic in it. Um, what, how does that influence the world? How does it work? Or like, what does it do in the story?
So in Heirs of the Veil, the one character that we see on the right using some magic is the main character, Vicky, who is looking for her mother. And
Mm-hmm.
she is a witch. And I don't believe, as far as it's shown in the comic, that, everybody's a witch and everybody uses magic. It's
Gotcha.
more of something that there's a balance that is to be kept and kind of shushed in a way. So
Mm.
Court on the left is a strayer whose job it is to keep that balance and to keep, magic users or witches or the unknown kind of in check so that people can kind of go about their daily lives.
Yeah.
Now, they do encounter some wisps, some other deadly magical foes that we see in the example to the right that Court and friends help out with. But it's very. I feel like the world is basically written in a time where that balance is being shaking. There's some crumbling about to happen and whatnot.
Got you. Got you. Got you. And the the story is centered around, is it their journey of learning how to be a witch? Is it about like just sort of following them in their life?
I think there is a little bit of that where like Vicky is like more or less like honing her abilities,
Uh-huh.
but like a lot of the story is actually a mystery. Like
Got you.
it's more about like what's going on in the world, and basically Court goes around like problem solving everything that's going on that involves the supernatural world because that's his job essentially.
Got you.
So whereas like it is kind of like that journey of like self discovery and everything. It's just like that is hand in hand with their whole like their mystery gang basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's fun. Like I really like that. And it seems like it's setting up, like you said, mystery, suspense, like what is happening. But I think that like I've seen that work really well together with talking about identity and like the mystery of who you are.
Yeah.
And it sounds like these blend together really well.
They
Oh,
really
they really, really do. And
Awesome.
I would definitely like recommend this, obviously, or not obviously, but there is some swearing, there's some darker themes. So, like Tiger Tiger, I would suggest an older audience. So, that nice blanket statement of 17 up to understand all the content to its full extent.
Hmm.
But I would definitely recommend it to people who like that spooky fantasy with mysteries and people who are interested in basically beautifully written characters and like awesome queer rep. It's got it all.
In the chat.
yes.
In the
And
chat. Yeah.
Veil is like a kind of like a little deceitful because like
Yeah.
usually when readers come in when they first start reading it, they're like, oh, like the setting is so cozy and everything is so sweet and everything because the backgrounds are beautiful. Everything is like it does have that bit of a cozy feeling,
Hmm.
but it's just like it really isn't. Like it goes like definitely to some darker territories and everything. So if you're expecting a cozy story, this might not be the one.
Oh, okay. So,
But it
like,
is wonderful in how it handles its tone and everything.
okay. So is this somewhat similar to Tiger Tiger, where like maybe a little bit older, based on
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so.
Got you, got you. And then like, who do you end up recommending it to? Like, is there any other things that I should know about if I were to recommend this to someone else? Like content
Um,
warnings or like, you know.
there is like visible like transphobia that does happen in the comic,
Gotcha.
and like there is a little bit of things that dip into that territory. So anybody who's like squeamish to that probably would be best given a heads up about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like then that sounds but that's good to know. And I mean,
Yes.
I think that I've seen that definitely ground pieces in reality and true experiences.
Yes.
But I appreciate the heads up.
Yeah.
And again, the next thing that we're going to be talking about, I also don't know. So, do you want to move on to that?
Oh yes, the cream of the crop. So our next
The resistance.
our next kind of big piece, I guess, of the recommendation panel is going to be Superpose. I love this comic so much, and the
Mhm.
fact that it is written beyond a comic. I've never seen something like it.
No,
It's beyond.
not at all. Oh my god. I think that when I first read Superpose, like I just had this moment of being like, have you ever read anything so sublime, so wonderful? Like I just could not believe that this is actually like free and available for everyone to read, because it was just like, what? Like how have I been like going on with my life knowing that this has existed for this long? And like I have no idea.
What? I could tell that you were excited about it. That when we were making slides for this, there were a lot of pages for Superpose,
Yeah.
and but as someone who's completely ignorant, I saw the site. I love the site. I love the aesthetic, but I haven't had a chance to read it. What is it about? Like, what is about it that you're so enraptured with?
I think it's just I guess we should give a little rundown of what it's actually about
Yeah.
too. So it's basically, it focuses on the relationship between the three protagonists as they attempt to make a teleporter, which is a very simplistic plot, but there is nothing simple about this story.
Mm.
Like, absolutely not. But it's just like there is something so like immersive about the tone and the setting and everything, that it's just like like as soon as I started reading, like I was completely just like sucked in. I could not like like I was just like completely immersed in the whole experience of what it is. And like there's just something about the mood and the pacing and everything that feels so like movie-esque.
Yeah, that's basically the number one way to describe Superpose, is that it reads like a movie. I don't know how that is possible, but it does. It reads like a movie. There are some segments that actually have soundtracks to them,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
the
cool.
flow. Oh yeah, the flow, the way the dialogue is written, the way the characters interact. I feel like I'm sitting in their living room and I'm listening to them.
Mm.
Yeah, like they're so natural and they feel so real and authentic, and like they really feel like real people, which is so wonderful to see.
Now, the similar as to Heirs of the Veil, Superpose deals with those raw and heavy feelings of transphobia that characters face, that people face, and the way that Superpose goes about it is intense and
Mm-hmm.
extremely grounding. And
I will say, like, it is rough to read, because like there are some moments that it's just like I would definitely like caution people who are interested in reading this, like just solely on the fact that it's just like it is very real and it is very realistic with the way that they carry it out. So just as a heads up, but like, oh man, like it's incredible. This whole story, its whole feel.
Okay.
and the creators are both trans themselves. Their
Cool.
experiences are so raw and so in this work
Mm-hmm.
that I would definitely say to read this if you're interested in basically those intensities, those feelings that they depict, because I can't get over them. There are definitely moments in this comic that you kind of sit back and you're like, oh, I'm crying, but
Oh wow. Am,
I
am,
definitely did read or definitely did cry while reading Superpose. I definitely did.
got you. So am I old enough to read this?
I don't know, Kevin.
Like, and so when you say that they were building a teleporter, I'm assuming that it's like sci-fi speculative fiction.
it is.
Got you.
It is. It is. Aside from like all the interpersonal relationships with the characters and everything, and the drama and like, everything that goes with it, it is a sci-fi. Like they literally want to make a teleporter.
And the aesthetic is inspired by like the 80s kind of neon
Yeah.
sci-fi world, but so grounded that I forget sometimes. And then they're like, yeah, we're building a teleporter. I'm like, oh, right.
So like, when you say, because I saw that when I went to the site, when you say like grounded in 80s sort of aesthetic, is this the sort of work that you'd recommend to someone who really likes, Stranger Things or Goonies or that sort of stuff? Or are you talking about someone who, is there a different sort of person you'd
Yes.
recommend this to?
I definitely think that like if you like those vibes that Stranger Things would give you, but like I don't know, with like the added bonus of the characters being queer, like definitely,
Got you.
I feel
I would say that that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
definitely like this reaches beyond anything that Stranger Things or Goonies would have touched with those good old 80s vibes.
Yeah.
Not to throw shade, but absolutely.
But I feel like it's beyond even the aesthetic. I feel like I would recommend it to people not based on that, but based on rawness of characters. It's again, if you like well-written characters, if you want to feel something, hey, if you want to cry,
Yeah.
Super is that intense, story-driven, intense, character-driven, and wonderfully paced and put together art piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's beyond a lot of what it is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So like any age range, content warning kind of thing?
It is on a site rated R. You will see
Gotcha.
as soon as you click on that, it says R because they are dealing with heavy subjects. So I would definitely say 17 and up. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of heavy hitting things. There's violence and whatnot that they deal with and heavier subjects.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely for more of a mature audience, for
Gotcha.
sure.
Should it be listed on doesthedogdie.com?
I don't think a dog dies.
Okay. Just checking. Felt like it should. I mean, we're talking about movies, and there's a lot of movies on there.
Yeah.
So, now, while we were coming up with the recommendation stream and what we were going to talk about here, there were so many things that we wanted to touch on. And you had a couple that you wanted to sort of lightning round through, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
So, why these four?
Oh, because it was so hard to not choose more.
Yes, it really was.
So on, I guess to the first one in row would have been "This Is Not Fiction" by Nicole Menino, and I definitely recommend that to anybody who likes a sweet and funny comedy with a satisfying slow burn romance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And additionally, the next one we have up is "Never Satisfied." I can say that anybody who likes, like tight world building with like lots of drama and action and just magicians competing, "Never Satisfied" is great for that.
Absolutely.
Then we have Job Satisfaction by Jay Barnes. So it's a clever, offbeat comic about queer demons and their summoners, and it has honestly, it's a good time. There's so many good jokes. There's so many good little quips that the characters do. It's got exceptional character building, and it's humorous. I love it. It's such a good comic. I definitely recommend that for people who like that quirky kind of fun.
Got you.
Beautiful character design. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I really like it.
Then the last on our list is going to be Muted by Miranda Munt. So it's a supernatural drama that follows troubled witch Camille Severin and her journey to embrace her past and find her true self. So another beautifully written comic that has a lot of queer rep in it. The main character starts to fall in love with another girl. It's sweet and it's also dark. There's definitely some darker themes. I'm so sorry for all the darkness.
It's 2020.
This hour of darkness.
Yep. Just bring it on.
It's definitely it's written with a lot of mystery, lots of intrigue, and I love it dearly. So
yeah, and for all of you who are in the last panel, Taylor was the host of that lovely panel, Scene, and this is their comic. They didn't talk. He didn't talk about it a lot, but here we go. And I also highly recommend Never Satisfied. I love it to bits. But as we slowly start going to the end of this panel, I have a comic to recommend, Ghost Shark Sickness. But because of my horrible powers that I have as the person hosting, I am going to make you describe it to the audience. Take it away.
All right. So, Ghost Junk Sickness. I've said this so many times. So, it is a story about two bounty hunters with an unstable as heck dynamic who are pushed to pursue this bounty called the Ghost. And they deal with the unknown and they deal with this intercosmic military. There's a lot going on, but it's a wild ride that has a lot of themes about seeing yourself in the world, wish fulfillment, and growth is the hugest thing that we explore.
And sorry to put you on the spot there, Crispy. You sound like I'm trying to get change out of you. You're just like, ugh. Like, no, it's really good. Like, I really like Ghost Junk Sickness. What you two do on this comic, aesthetically, storytelling, like, is really, really impactful. I really like it. And can you give us like an idea of, since I have you here, I can ask you directly. What
Yeah.
what about the queer themes in Ghost Junk Sickness? Is it the ghost, the junk, or the sickness that's the most queer?
I was waiting for that. I was so waiting for that.
You were? Oh, you could feel it. I'm sorry then. I should have tried harder.
So a lot of the queer themes we to go back to what Shade Runners kind of does is that the characters exist in the super huge world that is Ghost Junk Sickness, and they live as queer people accepted with their identities, but the basically the entirety of the cast is queer and has been confirmed throughout the story with how we do it as natural as possible, since we don't have the ways to explore that as we would in our social climate. So, one of the best examples I guess I could use is our main character, Vaughn, is non-binary, and their pronouns are they, them. And in the comic, they are misgendered once by the character Bogmouth, who is a beautiful trans woman. And they do they do correct them, Bogmouth, by saying what their pronouns is. And with someone like Trigger, who is this disaster of a man, he is this bisexual man who's running from multiple bad relationships right now. He's running away from his breakup with his ex-boyfriend Raz, and he's running away from his breakup with his ex-girlfriend Bogmouth. So we kind of intertwine their queerness like as naturally as possible with that confirmation, because I know that readers like myself do need that confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it's very interesting. I mean, this was brought up in the last panel, which is why I was so excited to hear about it. Was confirming an identity and how that can be very hard in different sorts of media. And the way that y'all handle it in Ghost Junk, I really like, because I wouldn't say that the story isn't about these characters' identities, but there's a lot going on, and that's not me saying that it's too complicated or anything. It's just the thrust of the story is not necessarily about that.
Yeah.
In the way that Airs, the way that you were talking about Airs sounded, but at the same time, it feels very natural the way that you two hit on those identities and like speak to them rather than someone just randomly spouting out something for like an hour.
Yes.
I mean, like, it's always like really affirming to actually like see a character say is like, "Hey, I'm actually gay," or "Hey, I'm actually this," and everything. But the way that we've written Ghost Drunk and everything is like there wasn't really a great moment for such a verbal confirmation.
Mm.
So we figured to compromise, the most that we could do is just like show the characters' relationships and just like really flesh them out and like just show them, just like show don't tell sort of thing.
Yeah,
Best as
absolutely. Yeah. And it's confirmed in the chat. The chat's talking about how that moment felt really chill, accepting, normal. And
Mhm.
like those are the same words that I would use too, chat. Like I I feel like not that everyone needs to model everything off of fiction, but it is nice to see a confirmation as someone who has been in those moments or knows that I'm going to hit those moments again, how
Yes.
to navigate it and how to do it without being disrespectful. And also like in the middle of something probably, not more important than the sense that someone's identity isn't important, but like when you're being chased by a bear, um, uh, you know, you want to talk about the bear.
Yeah. There's a
And
lot of
Yeah.
Ghost Junk. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Like, I do feel. Now, here's a question for you. As someone who has read Ghost Red Sickness for a while, and I finally have a chance to ask you questions. When you introduce a character, do you start a shot clock of just like, here's the thing that's chasing them? And like, you just decide how far away that thing is based on the character?
I don't even. I'm trying to think like what our like formula is for any of that. I mean, a lot of it is just like
In a sense, it's kind of by the seat of our pants, or just like intuitively, because with the way that some characters are like introduced and everything, it's just like we did think about it, but I guess not in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that that style, the way that you're building it, I think it has a lot of energy. Like when I look through it, not that I assume that both of you are just like absolutely having a blast every second, but it feels like
Well, I think we are.
uh, that I'm wrong. The but that transfers into your work. Like when I see the pages, when we were designing the site, that energy was really important to get across to the new readers who first come to the site, knowing that like this is vibrant, this is a colorful world, and it is, there's lots of eyeballs all over the place, and but it's like very fun. Like fun is a word that I use a lot to describe Ghost Junk to people. Um, and I hope that that doesn't come across as like demeaning the storytelling that you do, because I
No,
don't think that it is carefree or, I definitely wouldn't recommend this to like a 2-year-old or something. Um, but like as the people who make it, and this puts you in a weird social position because you have to recommend your own work to other people. But have you seen other people recommend you in certain ways to certain people, or do you recommend your comic to certain people?
has been recommended by other people. I'm gonna call myself out right now. I feel as a creator, you want to know what people think of your work, right? You want to be like, okay, what's up, guys? Like, what are you thinking? So
Turn the chair around.
Sometimes you jump into Twitter and you put Ghost Junk Sickness in the looks or the little, what is it called, the search bar. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what other people say about it. And usually, when I find people recommending it to other people, I find that they're really, really attached to the words bounty hunters and assume bounty hunters, good time, action, have fun. And that's not wrong. I'm not going to say, listen, it's not about bounty hunting. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
That seems to be like the biggest thing is just how like action is the hugest probably thing that they talk about.
Yes.
Just wild action, and then it just gets so dark.
And then, do you find yourself following this when you recommend your work to other people?
I've always like kind of like gauged it by like what I was reading, like basically when I was 14, and basically I would like recommend it to the people the same age as that, like at least 14 and up, because like it's a bit darker and it does have violence and it does have like this and that. But I don't feel like it's so heavy that like teenagers or whoever couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Because like, when I was a kid, I was reading like Trigun and like watching Cowboy Bebop and stuff like that, and like I just maybe I shouldn't have been reading it, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that as I get older, I think about that a lot of just using ages alone as a guide. It doesn't make sense because there's, so much variance there of, like I said before, what I could handle when I was younger, and what I could. And this is not related to Ghost Junk in particular, but like I really like Roald Dahl, but I now know that's not the best. Like The Witches is really intense, and I might not recommend that to all kids depending on their general temperament. But like, absolutely. I was thinking Trigun. Like, if anyone's watched Trigun and you like that, but you go like, is there a way I could get, like, not to reduce Ghost Junk to this plus other things. But if someone wants something fresh, something different, then Trigun. And, but they also want to make sure that the queer dial is turned up as high as you can. And the aesthetic dial is just broken off. Like, I definitely recommend Ghost Junk. And Space Dandy is another one that I've used. Because Space Dandy is very aesthetically pleasing. And but has a lot of energy and like, I would say joy, but joy implies that like, like a Mario game. But this is fun. This is a really fun comic.
Enthusiasm, I guess, could.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one thing that I love about it. Absolutely.
We're very enthusiastic about like just the entire process of making this comic, even to like the most mundane moments that really don't matter at all. We're just like amped up to like 10. We're just like, yeah, I can't wait for readers to read this.
Yeah. And like, so in the chat, I'm seeing people say that like, they think of it as like the Full Metal Alchemist or the queer indie webcomic scene. Full Metal Alchemist meets Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, I can see all of those.
They were definitely huge inspirations. And the first edition of Full Metal, if we can get kind of nerdy and anime about.
Really? On this stream where we recommended a million comics? Maybe this time. But absolutely, yes, I want to hear.
We were hugely inspired by the first version, the first anime of Full Metal Alchemist. That is dark. That is so dark. Watching it, I'm just like, I was 12 when I watched this. This is
Yeah.
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 Like, I was one middle child to be like sitting through this and being like completely unfazed by the horrible atrocities that happen throughout this show.
Yeah.
It was not that I'm saying getting scared is necessary. No, I'm definitely not on that. But I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of the stuff that I've watched from that younger kind of time definitely influenced Ghost Junk as what it is now. And Final Fantasy VII was another huge one, and it has a lot of dark themes as well, with characters finding themselves, going through those huge breakdowns, and those like mental deconstructions was another thing that we really wanted to go into.
Yeah.
And I do want to touch back with Tilly Walden with the fact that they were like, hey, I want to do sci-fi, but queer. That's exactly what Ghost Junk is. I saw Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
Like, that would be great if it was queer.
Yeah.
Same with
Yeah.
stuff. Like, it's just like I want to go into that, but I want to take chances. I want to have more identities. I want it to be something more,
Yeah.
basically, and something that relates to us as people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And like, I think describing darkness in a story can be hard when you're recommending it to someone, because there's so much variance there. Where like, talking about Full Metal Alchemist, I would describe it as dark, but it's a different kind of exploration than if someone's like, should I watch Full Metal Alchemist or should I watch Evangelion? And I usually go like, what is your experience with depression?
Yeah.
Because Evangelion really dives deep into it, and when it relates to Ghost Junk, like, it's not a world where those emotions don't exist, and it's not a world where dark stuff doesn't happen, but like Evangelion lingers on it, and
Yeah.
it really
Sure.
dives super deep, and Ghost Junk doesn't, not because you're unafraid of not that you're afraid of that, from what I understand, but like, you have an ensemble cast. There's a lot of stuff going on. You love movement. That's what I can see when I read the pages. Not to prescribe you, but like, so like, I mean, everyone, if you are depressed, take your time. But like in Ghost Junk Sickness, there is literally like some creature behind you, like most times. So like, if they're depressed and running at the same time.
Really explores the themes of running away from responsibility,
Yeah.
and taking that mantle to basically become stronger in the end. Slow burn comics is so hard to write sometimes, because with how Ghost Junk deals with a lot of things, it's slowly getting there. You know,
Yep.
you will see this character's past,
Yep.
you will see this character transform, but it will take that time to get there. Ghost Junk is estimated to be about 9 books thereabouts,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just getting to that raw kind of deconstruction of characters, of themes and stuff like that we really wanted to explore, and just honestly have fun with it, and just, you know, show that vulnerabilities that you don't see in stories. It's so funny when people compare Trigger to Spike Spiegel of Cowboy Bebop. I laugh every time when someone does. I'm just like, it's cool that he's so fragile, he's so vulnerable, and we're gonna explore that. And it's gonna be
Yeah. Because there's a couple things there, right? Where like, one is sometimes people just pick the closest thing they can think of, even if it's like, you know, if you're gonna tell someone like, hey, do you want chocolate chip ice cream? And they're like, is that like vanilla? And you're like, no, it's not at all. But that's all they can think of, is if that's all they've done, depending on what they can do. So I could see someone saying like, oh, it's like Spike Spiegel, and because they're thinking bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you, on the other end, because you know the character so well, you're like, that is not, no. Spike is so morose. Like, Spike spends like 90% of his life like training on his ship, punching by himself, just in silence. And Jet's just like, okay. But also, I mean, I've seen this from webcomic artists all over the place, is, you know, a moment that's going to happen like a year from now.
Yes.
And that is, for some artists I've heard, is like, that is what keeps you going.
It is. honestly have had the ending planned out from the beginning, and to get to that ending, to basically have the readers get to that point, probably gonna sob when we post it,
Oh, I
but
bet.
it's gonna be so intense. I honestly, when I think, because we constantly revise our thumbnails and stuff, we've done the thumbnails for all books, but you go back and get inspired, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
An ending has never changed because I cry every time we get to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, I mean, that's gonna be so big for you. It's like the end of a marathon. Like it's gonna be a lot, and um, it's such an interesting experience that maybe like we'll do a panel on this someday or something of just like, because I remember Issa posting a picture. Issa's in the chat somewhere, so I'm calling her out. Of growing older than your characters, or like the difference in time that you're experiencing. Because for your characters it's a month or a week or a year, but you're traveling at a different speed than them, and that experience of you knowing more about the character. I've had talks with EU, who was on the last stream, who does Magical How, and they talked about how characters would be like, oh, this character's so cute, and EU's like, I will show you, because she knows that character and knows that they're assuming something about that character that isn't real. And having the patience to just like, I mean, EU also did this, but for you, I don't feel like you and EU, like all of you, all three of you, it doesn't feel like characters act randomly in this.
No. Everything definitely has intent behind it.
Absolutely. And like in the chat, they're talking about how Ghost Junk Sickness has these amazing character arcs, and they have flaws, but they're explored very well, along with balancing that energy that you have and the momentum of the story that you're going through. I'm really into that. We are coming close to the end now. If anyone wants to ask us any questions, go ahead. And while we're waiting, is there age ranges or content warnings you give about Ghost Junk Sickness?
Range, I would say 14 and up. I think that's a general enough age that can handle the content.
Agreed.
And for various warnings, I would say that there's there's mentions of abuse, or there's gore, and there's violence, and maybe even a needle warning. A little bit of a needle warning if you're particularly squeamish on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would definitely say the same, like kind of older teen kind of thing, and yeah, Ghost Junk's got some darkness.
Absolutely.
And it's honestly, like, I remember when we were writing it with those dark things in mind, because we wanted to explore that. We wanted to introduce some characters, these raw feelings and whatnot, and basically troubleshoot our way through it. It was so scary posting those pages. Oh my gosh, because we don't know how to expect readers to feel about some things that delve into darker pasts and stuff like that. So it's been a trial and error, and it's been a journey. Huge journey.
Yeah, it really has.
In the chat, someone asked, who do you think has the saddest backstory as of yet to be drawn or already drawn out?
It's kind of hard because like all the characters kind of have shitty ass lives.
Botmouth has pretty unstable connection with her culture, her being an alien, and they call themselves the Bullabogans. She's kind of taken back from that culture, not 100% involved in it, and then she's not 100% involved with her family. So as she was younger, she, left the house and whatnot and fend for herself. And I think of Trigger, who has also the troubling past with his parents and whatnot, as he goes older and still has unresolved tension. But I can't say anything about Vaughn without being super spoilery. But there's a
It
lot
is
of
pretty depressing, though.
about that with Vaughn. If I'm gonna say it, I'm gonna say Vaughn has probably the worst backstory.
Yeah, I probably second that. It's pretty depressing.
And then our last question is going to be, how do you manage to seamlessly have both action and also intense character moments?
Oh man.
Um, when we write characters and that action scene and quiet moments and stuff like that, when we go with our thumbnails, we always like zone in on like, okay, what's the effect this is going to have and what's the point of it. So, when we have like action scenes, we want it to be fun, exciting, and whatever, but we also want them to have a point. So when character or action scenes that are fun and exciting and just sometimes could look random have those points, those meanings, it's really easy to tie it into a character breaking that down. So in Ghost Junk, one of the most like more well-known parts is Trigger chasing a bounty and he loses his leg from getting exploded on.
Spoiler alert.
It's all there. So the way that it's connected with the fact that this fight scene was started with a bet with an ex, and then how to deal with it afterwards, kind of like helps meld it all together without seeming like, and that was just an action scene. Thank you, Ghost Junk creators.
And I think that also like what we do is like when like characters need to carry out actions and stuff like that, it's not just like from point A to point B. Is we always try to consider is like, okay, but if they do this, how does it define them? And that's kind of like on every move that they do. It's just like, does this add to their character? Does this show us more of who they are? And we kind of base it on a line of thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, we're ready to wrap up. Do you have any other final thoughts or anything before we get before I ask you where people can find you?
I just hope that y'all enjoyed the stream. I hope that you check out some of the books
Yeah.
that we have recommended, the comics. They are very dear and inspire us all the time. And it was very easy to make this stream go for 10 hours longer, honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We did our
I do
best.
hope that if any creators present that we did talk about, I hope they don't feel misrepresented here. And I just hope that y'all feel seen and appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like,
Definitely. Shout out, Kevin.
yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I try. And I'm just so happy to have both of you on for us to talk about, like, this is a Pride stream, and I'm so it makes me so happy that we have this time. We have 2 hours to talk about it, and we have so many examples and so much more that we could have gone into of all of these comics. Where like,
Yes.
this is absolutely nothing against Veils, but I did notice how many of these stories don't involve someone's tragic experience. And Heirs explores that very well, but it also, there's other things going on. Not that those kinds of stories where someone explores their identity in depth is wrong or unnecessary or unwanted. But I often hear about people saying, like, I would really like to read a story with a trans character where they are getting chased by a dragon. Or something else. And here we've had so many good examples. And the fact that we had to restrain ourselves and, just from going on for more and more, which we could do, is such a cool thing to me. I'm very happy about that.
Oh yeah, definitely second that, tragedies do happen, but not everybody needs to be defined by that. And sometimes, you need that escape. You need that just existing because you do, and you want to see yourself fight some dragons or do whatever.
Absolutely.
It's all very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that I'm really grateful to be able to have you give these recommendations here and to spend this time with me. If you could be so kind, if people who are following or watching this later, this will be in up on YouTube at some point. Can you tell us how to find you?
So we are primarily on Twitter, I guess. So first of all, I guess I should say where our comic is. So
Yes,
our comic
please.
can be found at ghostjunksickness.com. And I am Space Rock Bun on Twitter.
And I am Feather_notes on Twitter.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And with that, I am going to say goodbye. You two, can you say goodbye to the stream?
Bye, guys. Thanks for hanging out.
I hope you enjoyed the stream.
So I love you, Giselle.
Absolutely. And I am going to continue for a moment by myself. We are moving on to an interview that we're going to have with Christine Liu and Intercosmic is what we're going to be talking about. We are going to take a short break, and just like before, we are going to be pausing. I'm going to stop the stream, and I'm going to restart it. This is for recording purposes. But you'll see this countdown. If it sticks, if the number sticks, refresh your stream in whatever way you can. And we'll be right back. Thank you so much.